The United States has given Israel an ultimatum: allow more aid into Gaza within the next 30 days or risk the U.S. dialing back its military support.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd deliver the warning through a letter which outlines specific steps that Israel must take, including allowing a minimum of 350 trucks to enter the enclave per day. It also cited a section of the Foreign Assistance Act, which prohibits military aid to countries that impede U.S. humanitarian assistance.
A spokesperson from the White House stressed that the letter was, quote, not meant as a threat. An Israeli official in Washington says the letter is being reviewed and that Israel plans to address the concerns raised. For more, we're joined by Stephen Zunes, Professor of Politics and Director of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco. Professor Zunes, good to have you back on the show. Appreciate you spending time with us once again. Let me start by asking you, is this a credible threat at all? It seems unlikely, Washington withholding aid at a time when the Iran-Israel crisis is heating up?
It would seem so, but legally speaking, the United States should have imposed such sanctions many months ago. As far back as February, the U.S. Agency for International Development determined that Israel was impeding aid and thereby violating the Foreign Assistance Act. And therefore, it was required under U.S. law to suspend some military aid. But President Biden overruled this, and they went ahead with the unconditional aid anyway. But things have been getting worse and worse. The humanitarian impact is harder to ignore. There's been a lot of pressure from the international community, from human rights groups, and from ordinary Americans to finally get the administration to live up to the law and to indeed threaten to withhold aid. Whether this actually happens, we don't know. The Biden administration has imposed a number of red lines on Israel, only to have them violate them with apparent impunity.
Yeah, but a previous letter in April did work. So how effective do you think U.S. warning this time around will be in pushing Israel to increase humanitarian access to Gaza?
Well, certainly there is recognition that the humanitarian situation is really gotten to a point where people are literally starving. People are dying. Hospitals are not getting some of the getting fuel for generators, for necessary equipment, and things like this. And with an election coming up, obviously the Biden administration has been getting a lot of pressure from their own base to address these issues. And there's fears it could negatively impact the Vice President Harris's chances to win in November. But on the other hand, it's no secret that Netanyahu would prefer for Trump to win. So even as the anxiousness in Washington to have some progress in this area grows, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Israelis will respond accordingly.
There's a bit of confusion as well. On the one hand, the U.S. making this demand to allow more aid into Gaza, and on the other, sending a THAAD unit and American boots, 100 American soldiers on the ground in Israel. How do you reconcile these two?
Well, that bringing in defensive weapons for Israel has not been as controversial as the 2,000-pound bombs and the other kinds of heavy equipment, that explosive ordnance and things that have caused so many civilian lives. There is some controversy, of course, regarding the anti-missile defense work and other things, because on the one hand, the United States is saying Israel should not escalate and have a diplomatic solution, but they're also saying, well, if you go ahead and expand the war anyway and provoke this reaction, we'll come to your defense. So it's not so Israel again feels like it can cross yet another red line. But at the same time, I think the distinction between defending Israel from missile attacks from Iran and withholding weapons that have been used primarily against defenseless civilians inside the besieged Gaza Strip, I think that there's enough of a distinction that it really is not ultimately a contradiction.
Professor, if Israel does not comply with U.S. demands, what sort of specific actions might the U.S. realistically take other than cutting off full military aid?
That would be quite significant, actually, because the Israelis are very dependent on this. No way they could have had this war going on for more than a year without the more than $18 billion of U.S. Military aid, not to mention the more than $5 billion worth of additional spending by the United States to protect Israel and protect shipping in the Red Sea and other kinds of support. So any cutback in this will definitely have an impact on Israel's ability to continue waging the war, at least to the degree that it has until now.
And Professor, Biden has about 100 days left in office until the inauguration in January, and there's a war front on three fronts, to be exact: Gaza, with Lebanon, and then Hezbollah, and one with Iran. Does that give enough time to present a plan to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East and a regional ceasefire?
Well, Biden came through with a plan as far back as in May for a ceasefire that got the support of the United Nations Security Council. Hamas conditionally accepted it, but Israel so far has not. And again, Biden has not pressured Israel really to accept it, despite having hundreds of thousands of Israelis out in the streets protesting, demanding that the government do so. I really don't see any big shift until January 20th. Depending on who wins, though, we could see a big difference. I mean, despite the fact that Kamala Harris, as vice president, has pretty much had to toe the line of the administration in terms of the unconditional support for Israel, there are quite a few accounts from knowledgeable insiders that as president, Harris would be willing to put a lot more pressure on Israel than Biden has up to this time, which could mean a hope for an end of these wars. On the other hand, if Trump wins, he's very clear he's going to give Israel even more of a blank check than Biden has provided, and we could see extended wars for the indefinite future.
So, Professor Zunes, would you say that this is quite a strategic, even, I don't know, smart tactical move? Because the 30-day deadline, suggests that it allows Biden to take stronger action after November 5th without losing, pro-Israel voter support for Kamala Harris on November 5th?
Actually, it seems to be just the opposite, because polls show that 77% of the American people believe we should be conditioning aid to Israel. Sorry, 77% of Democrats, almost 2/3 of Americans overall. And so it would not be an unpopular move to do so. In fact, it would really be crucial in winning some swing states like Michigan, where there are 82,000 Lebanese Americans and a couple 100,000 other Arab Americans, including Palestinians. If this is going to be a political move, it should be actually done before the election, not afterwards.
Understood. Professor Zunes, we have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts. Stephen Zunes, Professor of Politics and Director of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco.